How is it that a game made by two guys that has the graphics of a PS1 game earned $700,000 in their first week? Well, that's because the developers Dillon and David Szymanski are masters of the 3 secret keys to game dev success, and I don't know about you guys, but I want in on those secrets. So I spent the past few days diving deep into how Gloomwood was made, and it turns out that they also made some huge mistakes that would be utterly disastrous for new indies to fall into. And the first thing I found actually caught me off guard, because, well, it's easy to look at a new popular game and think, some guys have all the luck. I wish my game did that well. But really, blowing up on Steam has very little to do with luck. See, Gloomwood didn't just come out of nowhere. It's been gaining a following for at least 7 years. First article I could find on it came out in 2015. Now, 7 years is a long time to build up a following, and that's actually the first secret, but it's also their first mistake. Gloomwood's production time was way too long, and it's still only in early access. And to top it all off, Dillon had a completely different vision for the game when he first started it. Let me put it this way, if 2 guys each spend 10 hours a week for 7 years working on one game, and that game earns $100,000, they're basically making $9 per hour. And if they bought assets, that looks even worse. But Gloomwood made 7 times that much, and clearly the development time didn't damage the game's success in the end. Now, why is that? Well, it's only because Dillon and David both had a huge advantage that let them get away with taking their time making the game. If you or I took 5 or even 3 years to make a game, well, for one, we'd probably burn out, but also we don't have a bunch of people waiting out there on the edge of their seats for our next game to come out. And if you do have that, well, you should have made this video. So when I say that these guys didn't come out of nowhere, that's because they already had a pretty huge following from their past successful games, specifically Dusk. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, in that case it's obvious why their game did that well. But that's not the whole story, because even though Dusk did phenomenally well, that still wasn't their first game either. David actually has a huge library on itch.io of small games that he's been making for years, and some of them actually did pretty terribly. Having all these games under their belts, the skills and feedback gained from releasing them, the reputation they build up in their genre, and the years of slow, methodical improvements made after each game is what earned them their opportunity for success. And that's actually something that anyone can achieve. Except there is one major problem with this, and that's if it took these guys years to get that good at making games, can any of us really hope to achieve that same skill level? I mean, yeah, I think so, but there's actually a way to get there a lot more quickly. I don't think you need to make years and years worth of game projects. What I usually recommend is to make 1 game every week for a month, then make 3 one-month-long projects, and that gets you a solid 7 games, each one slightly bigger in scope than the last, and it only takes 4 months to do. And if you spend 6 months making small games, even better. And the more specific and focused you are doing this, the more excited your burgeoning audience will get about your work. And actually, limiting your time in this way comes with the perfect added bonus of challenging yourself to finish and release those games, which will help you get solid feedback more quickly, while also proving yourself to that potential audience. But even the credibility that comes with that isn't enough to make a successful game. CD Projekt Red is proof of that. Not only would Gloomwood have to be really good upon success to prove to their fans that they still got it, but they would also have to use secret number 2, which can potentially make marketing their game way easier. And that secret is the perfect game idea formula. Choosing the right genre for the right audience, plus throwing a unique hook on that genre, plus N. What's N? Oh, we'll get to it. But let's break this down. First of all, the genre that David and Dillon chose for their game goes against every sensible piece of game dev advice that anyone would tell you. And that genre is the immersive sim. Why? Because these games are almost always massive in scope, and they're extremely difficult to make. And based on VG Insights, numbers are just not promising. But the developers understand and love the genre. They know everything there is to know about Thief, System Shock, Deus Ex, all those well-loved old classic immersive sims that people really wish there was more of. That's what I mean by the right audience. These guys were already members of the classic immersive sim community. They knew there was an audience for their game because they knew what a big group of people felt was missing in their lives. And when they gave them what they were missing, they didn't just give them a remake of Thief. They made Thief with guns, which isn't something anybody's ever seen before. So it also added to the excitement and hype level surrounding the game. But there was one more thing that was missing, and that was, well, it was N. And what is N? Well, it's secret number 3, and I actually already said it in the intro to this video. Remember this? How is it that a game made by 2 guys that use the graphics of a PS1 game earned $700,000 in their first week?
Graphics of a PS1 game.
So I can think of several reasons why Gloomwood looks the way it does, but I think there are 2 main ones. If you look at all their other games, you can see that the graphics are almost always simplistic, while still looking quite nice with a visually cohesive art style. Which leads me to believe that for Gloomwood, the 2 played to their strengths. Not adding a whole lot lot of post-processing effects or high-fidelity graphics, but focusing on the gameplay. But I don't think that was the only reason, because you see, the real secret number 3 is that not only does your game have to be unique, but it has to be familiar enough and recognizable enough for that genre's audience to instantly look at that game and say, yes, that's what I want. And when you look at Gloomwood, you can easily, instantaneously recognize Thief in its DNA, and whether they did that intentionally or not, seriously, it works. So when you think about your next game, make sure you aim for striking that careful balance between familiarity and uniqueness. But even if you take these 3 techniques and integrate them into your project, you still run into the issue that Gloomwood took as long as it did to make, and at least 95% of developers lose their motivation entirely and never even finish their first game. And that's why in this next video, I put together the most powerful strategies to motivate yourself to finish and release your game, because the sooner you do that, the sooner you'll gain the skills needed to create the next big Steam hit. Thanks for watching, and God bless.